Hey everyone, it's Kevin. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started with multicolor 3D printing using the Bambu Lab P1S with the AMS attachment and Bambu Studio, along with a few key things to keep in mind when designing for multicolor prints. And even if you're new to 3D printing or not using this exact setup, this video will still help you understand the design principles behind creating something multicolored. To walk you through it, I'll be using this heart container coaster I made in Blender 3D inspired by the Legend of Zelda. I'll start by going over my 3D file in Blender, share some important design tips, and show you how I set it up for multicolor printing. Then we'll export the file and bring it into our slicer Bambu Studio, where I'll go over the painting tools and a few helpful settings before sending it to print. I'll also have this Blender file available as a free download in the description if you want to follow along. Let's get into it. So here I'm in Blender with the heart container coaster. This design is made up of 5 different meshes: the bottom frame, a middle layer, an inner heart that's inset into the middle layer, and 2 smaller pieces for the glare highlights. One of the main things I prioritized when creating this was making sure that each section I wanted to color was its own separate mesh. It just makes it way easier when you're assigning colors later in the slicer and helps minimize filament changes, which I'll talk about in the next part. I also made sure to cut all the segments cleanly using booleans, so there's no intersecting or overlapping geometry, which helps avoid print errors and keeps everything clean. Just to give you an idea of the colors I'm going for, the bottom frame will be marine blue, the middle section a lighter blue, the heart a red, and the glare details white. The colors here in Blender are just for visualization. They don't actually lock in your final print colors. You're going to be assigning the real colors inside your slicer. So even though all the components are separate, they'll still bind together when printed because they're cut precisely to each respective segment. Now, a few more tips when designing for a multicolor print. Try to separate colors vertically and not side by side. 3D printers build layer by layer from bottom to top, so once it's done with one layer, it moves on to the next. But if there's more than one color on a layer, the printer will need to pause and do a filament change to the new color before completing that layer. This means it has to purge the current filament from the nozzle, prime the new color, and then continue printing. Depending on how your multicolor print is designed, this could happen constantly and potentially waste a lot of filament and add a lot of extra print time. For example, if you have 2 vertical elements side by side, one red and one blue, the printer will have to swap filaments back and forth as it moves up the layers. And depending on the height, those swaps can really add up and slow down the print time significantly. So this is something I always try to optimize when designing my prints. Going back to this example, because I've separated the segments vertically, I've been able to mitigate unnecessary swaps for the most part. However, I did want the red heart inset into the light blue middle layer to keep the top flat so it could actually function as a coaster. To do that, I made the red heart segment very thin, about 10 layers thick, so the color would be visible, and inset into the middle layer using booleans. Inevitably, there will still be some filament swaps to accommodate this design since there are both red and blue pieces on the same layer, but not nearly as many as if the red heart piece were taller. Keeping the height low lets you keep the color distinction without constant swaps throughout the entire print. The second is to simplify tiny color zones. Small detailed color changes can be tricky to print cleanly and usually cause extra purging and wasted filament. So to the last point, the printer has to swap filaments for every tiny area of color, even if it's just a few layers, and that can add up really fast. When I'm designing multicolor prints, I try to simplify the color zones and avoid overly small or intricate areas unless they're absolutely necessary. This keeps the print more efficient and reduces the chances of waste or printing issues. The third is to watch your overhangs. So as a general tip, multicolor or not, it's always a good idea to watch your overhangs. An overhang is any part of the model that extends outward without much support underneath. If the angle is too steep, usually anything over 45 degrees, the printer can struggle to build it cleanly without having to enable support material. In multicolor prints, this gets even trickier because supports can be harder to remove cleanly when different colors are involved. So when I'm designing, I try to limit steep overhangs and keep the geometry as support friendly as possible. It helps get cleaner prints and saves time on post-processing. The fourth is to clean up your geometry. So before exporting, it's a good idea to clean up your model and check for any geometry issues. issues. If you're using Blender in edit mode, you can go to select at the top of the viewport, select all by trait, non-manifold, or just use the shortcut Shift-Control-Alt-M to quickly highlight problem areas. From there, you'll want to fix any holes, overlaps, or floating geometry before exporting your model. Another tool I like to use is the 3D Print Toolbox add-on, which automatically checks for non-manifold geometry and other issues. This is a free add-on that you can enable by going to Edit, Preferences, and then clicking Get Extensions and searching for 3D Print Toolbox. Once your model is cleaned up and ready, you can go to File, Export, and choose STL to save your file, and then we'll bring it into our slicer. Here, I'm in Bambu Studio, which is the slicer I'm going to be using for this print. Let's start by importing the exported STL file. Just click Add, which is this icon at the top, and select your model. First, I want to load the filaments I'm going to use, which are already installed in my AMS. You can also add more slots by clicking this button. Since I'm using Bambu filaments, they're going to auto-detect and show up here, but if you're using others, you can manually assign a color by clicking the color icon and selecting from the list. To add colors to different parts of the model, click on the object, then go to the color painting tool. That's the little paint bucket icon up here. You'll see your loaded filaments at the top and the painting tools listed right below. So let's break those down real quick. The circle tool works like a brush. It paints a flat circular area based on your current camera angle. It's great for surface level painting, almost like stamping a decal onto your model. The sphere tool is a 3D brush that paints through the model in a spherical volume. It's useful when you need to color inside cavities or select geometry through multiple layers. You can also adjust the brush size depending on how precise you want it to be, and you have some selection options to fine-tune it. The triangle tool lets you paint based on your mesh's geometry. It snaps two surfaces more cleanly and gives you more control over where the paint lands. The height range tool is super handy when you want to assign color based on Z height. You can set a specific range using the sliders and it'll apply your selected color to only that part of the model. The paint bucket tool is great for quickly filling entire parts. It assigns a filament to a whole mesh or connected surface area with just one click, and it's super useful for complex models. The gap fill tool helps you clean up areas the other tools might miss, especially small gaps between color zones or spots that didn't fully get assigned. It scans for unpainted regions and automatically fills them based on surrounding colors, helping ensure your model is fully assigned before slicing. Once you're done, you can go up to Slice Plate. Now, the way I've painted this here isn't really optimized for printing, and it's wasting a lot of filament. In this case, it's showing a lot of filament changes, a pretty high material cost, and a long print time. It's important to note that when using the painting tools, you can assign colors inefficiently if you're not careful, especially on internal geometry. But since the parts of this model are already separated into different meshes, we can fix that and bring those numbers down. Let's go back to Prepare and open the color painting tool. From here, click Erase All Painting. Since this object is made up of multiple meshes, I'm going to exit the painting tool and click this button, Split to Parts. When you import a mesh into Bambu Studio, it comes in as a single object, but using Split to Parts lets you break it apart and access the individual meshes. Now, under the Process tab, switch from Global to Objects, and you'll see we'll have the 5 segments listed, and this is where we can assign colors directly. By double-clicking on one of the color boxes, I can assign a specific filament to each part and match the original concept. So marine blue for the base, light blue for the middle, red for the heart, and white for the glares. Now, when I slice the plate again, you'll see a big difference. I've brought the filament changes down significantly, the cost is much lower, and the print time is almost half. So while the paint tool is really useful in some cases, just keep in mind that how you use it can really impact how optimized your print will be. One last thing I want to mention is the structure that shows up next to the model. That's called the prime tower, and it's automatically generated whenever your printer swaps colors. It's used to prime the nozzle with the next filament so the colors can stay clean. In some cases, you might disable it to save filament if you already know how the print will go, but I recommend keeping the prime tower enabled, especially if you're new to multicolor printing. It helps prevent color mixing or streaking and leads to better results overall. You can adjust it under the multicolor printer settings if you want to fine-tune it or reduce waste, but for most prints, it's best to just leave it on. Once everything looks good, you can go ahead and print it out. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope this was helpful for getting you started with multicolor 3D printing. If you want to try out this exact heart container coaster, again, you can find the free file linked below to my Gumroad. And if you want to learn more about designing for 3D printing, you can check out my other videos in my Blender Basics for 3D printing series, and I'll link those down below as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in the next video.